Welcome along to Season 3 of Into the Sky, where we soar through the captivating story of the iconic Avro Vulcan XH558. I'm your host, Martin Price, and this season we're bringing you an all-star lineup of guests, a pilot who commanded this magnificent aircraft, the dedicated volunteers preserving her legacy, and the education partners inspiring South Yorkshire's youth and the team shaping XH558's future. Join us as we unravel the rich history of this Cold War titan, discover how she's fueling STEM education, explore how lessons from the past are engineering tomorrow's innovations. From the cockpit to the classroom, Into the Sky bridges generations, proving that XH558's influences reach far beyond the runway. Buckle up for a journey that'll span decades and touch the lives of many. This is more than a podcast, it's a flight through history, innovation and inspiration. So welcome along, another episode with the Vulcan to the Sky. Only this time, I think we could actually call this gentleman a celebrity within the aviation fraternity. I'm talking today to our very own Kevin Taff Stone. Hey, Taff, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Martin.
Nice to be talking to you today. What I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, is just skip back a few years. When did you actually realise you wanted to be involved with aviation? Was it something you really wanted to do as a kid?
As a kid, I wanted to join the military. I wanted to get away from where I lived, which was But in South Wales. There was the big steelworks and nothing else. Originally, it was going to be a Navy to go around and see the world, but one of my mates joined up a year before me and told me, no, you're better off going somewhere else. The Army really wasn't for me, so Air Force, there it was.
Didn't really leave you a great deal of option, did it, to be honest with you?
No, but it was enough to get me away.
Good man. So did you go in with the intentions of being an electrical technician? How did that come about?
I actually applied for an apprenticeship which was more avionics based, but when I done the entrance exams, I passed the normal ones, but I actually failed the apprenticeship by, I think it was about 1 mark. So they gave me the option I could either come back in 6 months, try again, become an officer, or join up as a direct entry technician, electrician. So electrician it was.
You didn't fancy the officer thing then?
And thought, well, Martin, you do know me. Could you see me as not being an officer?
No, not really, no.
That was my thought, even at a young age.
So you joined the RAF in 1980, is that correct?
It is, yeah. I'd done, I think it was about 15 months as a direct entry technician at RAF Waltons and come out as a junior technician.
And what was the first aircraft that you worked on?
Believe it or not, it was the Vulcan.
No way.
Yeah,
wow.
In fact, the last phase that we done on our training courses was AC power generation, and it was actually the equipment from a Vulcan that had been flown into Walton in the 70s. They'd taken it all out and they built a test bench so they could teach, obviously, the youngsters. And I'll never forget the instructor telling me, this bit of kit is off a Vulcan bomber. Don't worry, you'll probably never see it again. And that was 40-something years ago.
Famous last words they were then, weren't they?
Certainly
were. So where were you stationed then when you completed your training?
I came out to train Walton in June 1981 and went on to the Vulcans at RAF Waddington. I was based in Forehanger, which was MEAS, which was Mechanical Engineering Aircraft Squadron. Basically, is where they were doing all the second-line maintenance of the aircraft, the minor stars and things like that. The major servicing used to go down to RAF St Athens, but anything other than that was obviously either done at Waddington or Scampton, depending on the squadrons. So I was in, if you like, in the garage bit. I was on the second line.
Right, okay. And were you at Waddington long?
Yeah, I was there until they stopped flying the Vulcans. I was lucky enough to be on them during the Falklands in 1982. And then when they were disbanded in 1984, I was lucky enough to still be awaiting posting. So I done 6 months on what was then the Vulcan display flight. I was there in 1984, and then I got promoted at the end of 1984. I went on to a less inferior display team over at Scampton, Red Arrows. Was it something like that?
I think I've heard of them. Yeah. Right. So, Red Arrows. Blimey. So, what, electrician on the Red Arrows, were you?
Yeah, it was, again, I was lucky enough. I got the promotion at the end of 84, and at the time, I was still waiting to be posted because everybody at that time, all the Vulcan squadrons had gone, and nearly everybody being posted across onto the new Nimrods that were supposedly coming in. But I was actually overdue promotion and a posting. So when I sort of chased my boss up at the end of the display season, I said, what's happened to my promotion and am I being posted? And then he sort of phoned around and he says, I think I got you an ideal job. And then the following day, there it was, Red Arrows at Scampton.
Oh, nice one. So you were part of the Blues then, were you?
I was, yes. When I first moved across there again, I went on to the second line. And as I was the new boy, I actually went across and moved into the avionics electrical bay. The Red Arrows had their own sort of second line maintenance for all the components, electrical components. So there was a sergeant comms radar, a corporal flight systems, and a corporal electrician, and we maintained our own bits of equipment. So if a valve or any bit of the electronics went wrong, the first line would change the bit of kit, and then it would come into the bay, and then I would have a quick look to see if I could fix it. If not, then it would go away to third line maintenance, which at that time was RAF sealing, which was like going back to the manufacturer as such.
Right. So that would have been, in the 80s, that would have been the Hawk that you were working on then, is that correct?
It was, yeah. It was. So I went on to them at the end of 84, managed to stay on them then till the end of 1990, and I was lucky enough to actually wangle my way onto first line, and I was the spare circus member, and because of various injuries and problems some of the lads had, I actually done virtually a whole year flying backseat on different aircraft.
Really? Wow. Yeah. So when you say you're flying backseat, is that just when you're going from point A to point B, or is that during the display as well?
Yeah, you're not actually allowed to be on board during the display because, unfortunately, in the 80s, when there was an accident between what was the RAF display vintage pair, which was the Meteor and Vampire, they had technicians in the back at the time when they were displaying, and unfortunately they were lost. So it became policy then within the military that you were only allowed to be in on transit, whatever. But I was lucky enough to be backseat for takeoffs, formations. I've actually done one of the fly pasts over Dunkirk, which was quite nerve-wracking because when I was sat on board, I was number 2, and the pilot turned round to me and says, can you let me know what's happening? I thought, you're driving. What do you mean, tell me what's happening? But all he was doing, and this is what they used to do, is Red One used to fly the aircraft and he used to see where he was going and fly the display, and then everybody else then would fly on him. So all they were doing was looking at his wingtip and lining up their aircraft to keep in the correct formation, which is the wingtip to the little shield underneath the cockpit, roughly. So as long as that's in line, then they knew they're in the exact position. So he was flying along, just looking at the boss, and obviously not seeing what else was going on.
Blimey, so you were having to keep him informed if people were in or out of line, basically. Is that what you're saying to me?
Well, they used to do that, but he obviously couldn't see what was going on because they had all the flotilla down below, the fire ships, spray in the water and things like that. No, he wasn't doing that. He was just watching exactly what was going on, obviously with the boss. And the bloke on the outside of him was looking at his wingtip to make sure he was in line with him, and so on.
Right. Not many people can say that, mate. So, nice one. Nice
one of the lucky few.
Yeah. So when you finished with the arrows, where did you go then? What happened then?
I went back onto the Vulcan display team then. I'd kept in touch with them because when I got promoted in the end of 1984, I went on to the Red Arrows. That was in October. In the January in 85, they actually made the Vulcan display team an official post, same as the Red Arrows and the BBMF and all that lot. They made the Vulcan display team an official posting, for personnel, which was, if they'd made it a month or two earlier, I could have stayed there. But as it was, so I kept in touch with the lads, and they came and asked me, even though I was trying to get back on for quite a while, and then they came and asked me saying, do you fancy coming back on? There's a vacancy. I said no, because I just got myself a back seat for the Far East tour with the Red Arrows. All of a sudden, I got called into the boss's office in the December. He says, "You've been posted and I don't know where." Well, I said, "Oh, I do. I'm going back onto the Vulcan." I said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Well, they've been talking to me." He wasn't very happy because it's normally the Red Arrows usurp everybody else and not somebody else pinch from the Red Arrows. At the end of 1990, 1991, I then went back onto the Vulcan display team, and I was there then till 93, until it was disbanded again, and we flew the aircraft to Brittingthorpe.
I was just going to ask you that. So were you in the aircraft when it flew in, or were you on the ground crew watching it come in?
I was on the ground crew. Again, they didn't have any technicians on board as such, because they had as many of the air crew as they could to get on, obviously, because it was the last flight, and they were doing very similar to what we done with the trust, doing the round robin of various bases and all that lot. So I actually marshalled the aircraft out of RAF Waddington, jumped in a transit van, drove to Brittingthorpe, and then marshalled it back in at Brittingthorpe. So if you look at the old videos of it coming into Brittingthorpe with all them thousands or hundreds of people all around the pan with no barriers and everything, it was me that marshalled it in.
The good old days when you could get close to them, eh? Health and safety, what was that?
Oh, yeah, who needs it?
So you were still in military service then when you marshalled 558 into Brittingthorpe? Because you left in 1999 from the RAF, is that correct?
No, I actually left in 2006. I done various jobs in there from 1999, from 2000 to 2006. My last 6 years in the Air Force was in the Sentry engineering team. I was writing modifications and technical instructions for the AWACS.
Right.
When I first took the active Brittingthorpe, we went down several times to help them out with the aircraft, and that was the days of the old Dennis and Andrew Edmondsons and all that lot, who were volunteering to look after the aircraft. So we went down, showed them what went on, and so after about a year or so, left them to it. That was it until 1999. Then I had a phone call from Dave Thomas, who was obviously our display pilot, saying that they've got a problem on the electrics they've been trying to fix for 6 months. Do you mind if I give them your phone number and see if you can help them? So Andrew Edmondson phoned me up, chatted to him on the phone for 10 minutes, told him what the problem was, and fixed it. And I was lucky enough to be on board for the last taxi run that they'd done at Brittingthorpe before they started ripping it all apart. I was on board as a little thank you for fixing the aircraft when they'd done their last taxi run before they started to strip her down to try and restore it to flight. It was a bit of a trick, go on board. Barry Maresfield wants to speak to you. So I climbed on board thinking there was a problem, and they shut the door and off we went.
Don't complain, mate.
Oh, I didn't.
Blimey. There's a lot of us who'd give us right arm for that, yes. To be quite true. Yeah. So did you know at that point then, when in between, that there was going to be a restoration of it? Because most people would probably think she went there just to do the fast taxis. There was a period of time when nobody really knew what was going to go on. And then, God bless him, Robert decided to bring her back to life again.
As I say, I was there when they first went there, and then obviously I lost touch and I carried on with the rest of my career. I got in touch with them, or they got in touch with me to fix it, which was just before they'd done the feasibility check and everything. And then in early sort of 2000, after they were doing the feasibilities, they were obviously at RAF Waddington at the air show, touting, saying, come and help restore the air. We hope to restore the aircraft. And every year, Andrew Emerson used to come in, because I was based at RAF Waddington on the AWACS. So I used to see him during the air show, and he'd say, do you fancy a job? I said, is it a proper job yet? No. So, well, if it is a proper job, don't worry, axe it. And then I'd just about had enough with the Air Force. I'd spent 6 years in the design. I had a couple of new bosses, and I thought, I'm getting too old for this now. I've just about had enough. So Andrew sort of turned round to me at the air show, as he did every year, and says, right then, Taff, do you want a job? And I looked at him and said, yes. And if you'd have seen his face, right, we need to talk then.
Talk about taking the wind out of his sails there.
Obviously, he was still waiting for the usual reply, because I still had sort of 3 years left in the Air Force before I was due to come out. But, he caught me at the right moment. So went and had words, went and had an interview with him down at Bruntingthorpe. I then went and had my second interview with Robert, and he told me no.
No way.
Yep, he wouldn't let me come out of the Air Force, because obviously we was always on sort of 6 to 8 weeks' notice because of the funding and all that lot, and he was worried about me coming out of the Air Force. So he turned around and says, can you go and have words and see if I can get a secondment from the Air Force to the Vulcan to help them restore it?
Right.
Fair enough. So I went back, went through all the appropriate channels within the MOD. Unfortunately, they wouldn't allow that, and the only thing that they would allow was me to take a 12-month unpaid leave from the Air Force to go and work on the trust. But unfortunately, without my pension or support from the RAF, the money that was being offered, I couldn't afford to have done that. So in the end, I says, no, I'm going to hand my notice in. But I didn't do that because they were trying to put me on a multi-skilling course, because in the RAF in the 2004 period, 2006, they were multi-skilling everyone. So it becoming more like the civilian world, where it was airframe and propulsion and electrical and avionics. And what they were doing, they were training electricians to become avionics, and they were training avionics to become electricians, and vice versa with the engines and the airframes. So I thought, no, I'll do my multi-skilling course, because obviously avionics were coming extremely handy for me on the Vulcan. Yeah. So I thought, I'll go and do that. And my boss actually tried to stop me going on the course in the MOD, because he knew I was going to come out. But I told a little poke, he said, well, if I actually do the course and I get promoted, I'll probably stay in, because I was due promotion to Chief Tech. So in the end, it was the admin section at the RAF Waddington turned around to my boss and said, no, you cannot stop him going. So I turned up at Cosford on day one of my course and handed in my resignation.
You little tinker, you.
So that was in August of 2005, and that was the first full working week I'd done till I left the Air Force in April 2006. And as part of my resettlement training, I'd done the Marshal's Vulcan training, because on the Vulcan we had to do a bit like the civil aviation has to do, because we were complex, that we had to do type-rated courses. So they got the old training notes together, and they put together a training course for airframe, propulsion, and electrical. and all the Marshall's technicians who were part of the restoration and obviously the Vulcan staff had to do these training courses, which was roughly between 2 to 4 weeks per course.
So that was all the engineering crew at that time at Bruntingthorpe had to do all that course. So just jumping forward a bit then, what about when 558 came to Finningley? Because it was a different crew then, wasn't it, at Finningley?
So, some of the crew were the same, some were different. What I done is actually, because I know one of the last ones to join us was Rick Lee, who came out to the Air Force in the last couple of years, and I actually done the training course with him, and he sat the exams as said. So we carried on the same ethos as what Marshalls and that, because that was one of the things that they said for the complex aircraft, we had to have training. So while we were still flying, so Ray, Sam, all the ones that joined after the original lads still had to do the training courses. Right.
That's what I was wondering, because if it was a switch of crew, then obviously everybody's had to go through the same sort of training to get to the standard.
Yeah,
right.
That was something that as the chief engineer, I kept together that we needed to maintain the high standard.
Yeah. So you eventually came out of the RAF. You were involved with the Vulcan. Did that become a full-time occupation for you then?
Yeah, same, because a PV I had from the Air Force, which just took basically voluntary redundancy, came out and started working on the Vulcan in February of 2006, which is when they were doing these training courses. And I actually, with Marshalls, they were only doing whatever trade that they were. So if they were an airframe trade, they only done the airframe course. Or if they're just electrical, they only done the electrical course. But because I was sort of earmarked to be one of the crew chiefs, what it was going to be, I done all 3 courses, which is what they done in the military. In the military, you'd have your own basic trade, but when you became a crew chief for the aircraft, you done all trades, because then you could oversign everybody and do the work. So I turned up in February, and from the first week of Feb, I think it was, to the last week of April, I spent in the classroom at Bruntingthorpe doing all 3 courses.
I bet you loved that.
Oh, I did. Marshall people weren't very happy when I came top on all 3. Airframe and propulsion.
Oh, blimey. Yeah. No need for them then. That's it. Taft's the man. So how long have you been with the Trust then? So if I'm understanding you right, you've been with them from 2006. So as we're talking now, this is 2024. You at this point have been involved with 558 then, or the Vulcan.
That's 18 years with the Trust.
18 years.
And I've been on Vulcan since 1981, on and off.
Blimey. No wonder you know what you're talking about when we're up there looking after her. Blimey. So, I mean, again, just going back to what we were talking about when she flew in to Bruntingthorpe, and it seemed, from where I'm sat, that it was almost instantly that there was going to be a restoration program.
Yeah, they did, because the Waltons, bless them, they done everything right. When they bought the aircraft, the old man Seth, his dream was always to get the aircraft flying again, and he obviously was supported by David. So what they done, they bought all the ex-war stock of Vulcan spares. So I can't remember how many tons now. I used to know it off pat when we used to do the tours and everything. But they bought over sort of 200 tons of spares, and they bought all the ex-war stock and everything. They done all the right things. They got all the books. They got as much equipment as possible. And when we handed the aircraft over to them, a couple of us sort of went down for the first couple of months to teach them how to utilize the aircraft.
Because obviously one of the things that we get asked frequently when we get visitors around the aircraft is, will she ever fly again? Of course, we all tell them categorically, no, she'll never fly again. But from a technical point of view, maybe you can put a bit of a spin on that.
Since we stopped flying, I've kept I've got the original 700, which is, if you like, the aircraft logbook with all the servicings and everything that's in there and what's been done. And I did start a new logbook for when she wasn't flying. So I've been recording all the various services that I've been doing, when I've been doing the running. The theory is, as of today, I can turn around and tell you exactly what needs to be done to get it back in the air again. Right.
So really, it's only the backing of the of Marshalls and Rolls-Royce.
BAE.
What was the other one? BAE. That, and because of the CAA regulations, is the reason why we can't put it back in the air. Right. So in terms of, I've got to be careful how I word this, because obviously I don't want to put you on the spot, but what are the long-term aspirations for the aircraft? Let me put it that way.
I can't see why we can't carry on doing what we've been doing now, which is functioning all the systems and running the engines. Now, if the airport moves and comes back up again, then I think we could go back to taxiing.
Well, Taff, do you know, it's been great talking to you, mate. I know we speak quite frequently when we're around the aircraft, but just sitting down having a chat like this has been brilliant, mate. So thanks very much for taking the time out to chat to us today.
Not a problem at all, mate. Anytime, you know that.
That's all for today's episode of Into the Sky. We hope you've enjoyed soaring through the legacy of XH558 with us. Your support helps keep the story of the Vulcan alive, and if you'd like to support the Trust a little more, or find out more about what is happening, why not visit our website, vulcantothesky.org. There you can learn more about our mission, and here you can also make a donation if you wish. You can follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and updates. And sharing this podcast with fellow aviation enthusiasts is another great way of supporting the Trust and helping keep this legacy alive. Every contribution to preserve this iconic aircraft for generations to come is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, keep your ears tuned into the sky.